My name is Lavra Carter, and for as long as I can remember, I have always felt like an outsider in my own family. I was the invisible daughter, the one who never quite fit in, no matter how hard I tried. My older sister Sarah was everything my parents ever wanted. She was beautiful, successful, confident, and, most importantly, she always knew how to get along with everyone. On the other hand, I was the odd one. The awkward daughter who didn't know how to be social. The one who was often lost in thought, always preferring solitude over the chaos of family gatherings. Growing up, I always believed that one day I would earn my place at the table. I spent hours studying, trying to excel at school, hoping that one day my achievements would be acknowledged. But that day never came. Instead, it felt like I was always overlooked, ignored, and dismissed as unimportant. My father's praise was always reserved for Sarah, the perfect child. I tried not to let it bother me. After all, what was the point of fighting for recognition when it seemed like nothing would ever be good enough? One evening, as I sat at the dinner table, the familiar weight of being invisible pressed down on me once again. My family had gathered for one of those formal dinners where my father would often give a speech. It was a tradition, a way for him to highlight the accomplishments of our family, and Sarah was always the star of the show. This time, however, things would be different. I wasn't even sure why I decided to attend that dinner. Maybe it was because I hoped that just for once I would be seen. Maybe deep down I was still holding on to the hope that my father would finally recognize me, acknowledge my worth. But as I sat there, surrounded by the usual polite chatter, I knew the truth. I was just a shadow in this family, a mistake that no one cared to talk about. Then came the moment that would change everything. My father, Thomas Carter, stood up with his glass raised, a smile spreading across his face as he prepared to deliver his annual family toast. My heart sank, and I felt my palms grow clammy. I knew what was coming. He would talk about Sarah, shower her with praise, and leave me out, as always. But as I braced myself, he did something I didn't expect. He called me out. "To my daughter Sarah," he began, his voice full of warmth and pride. "The pride of this family. Always a shining example of success, grace, and hard work." I forced a smile, knowing exactly what was about to happen. Sarah beamed with pride as my father continued, showering her with compliments. But then, he turned to me. His gaze was cold, dismissive. "And then there's Lavra," he said, with a laugh that didn't reach his eyes. "The one who's always in the background, trying to make something of herself. Well, she's not quite there yet, is she?" I froze. He didn't stop there. "Honestly," he continued, looking at me like I was some inconvenience, "we've been debating for years whether she even belongs here. She's never fit in with our family's values, and frankly, I think she's always been a bit of a disappointment." The room fell silent. I couldn't breathe. The weight of his words hit me like a physical blow. It wasn't just that he had publicly humiliated me. He had completely erased me from the family, as if I was nothing more than a mistake he regretted. His words weren't just cruel. They were a direct attack on my very existence. Everyone at the table turned to look at me. Some were shocked, some were embarrassed, and some looked away, pretending they hadn't heard. But no one said anything. No one stepped in to defend me. I was invisible. And that's when I knew. I wasn't just the overlooked daughter anymore. I was the one who had been cast aside. But I wasn't going to take it anymore. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor, and without a word, I left the room. My heart was pounding in my chest as I walked out of the dining room and into the quiet hallway. I needed to get away, to escape the suffocating weight of that dinner, and to make sense of what had just happened. My father's words echoed in my mind, cutting deeper with each step I took. Outside, I stood in the cool night air, my breath visible in the darkness. I pulled out my phone, my hands shaking as I opened the Notes app. I typed a single sentence. "This will be the last time they treat me like this." It wasn't just anger I was feeling. It was a deep, burning sense of betrayal. How could my own father say those things to me? How could he dismiss me so easily, as though my existence didn't matter? But I wasn't going to let it slide. I wasn't going to be his punching bag anymore. I would change everything. I made a promise to myself that night. No longer would I be the invisible daughter. the one who stayed in the shadows while others got all the praise. I was going to take control of my life, build my own success, and make sure my father knew exactly who I was. The next day, I began to make plans. I wasn't going to let this humiliation define me. I would make sure that one day, Thomas Carter would regret every word he had said. But I knew I had to be smart. I had to be strategic. This wasn't just about getting back at him. It was about proving that I was stronger than he ever gave me credit for. And I would make sure that when the time came, my revenge would be something he could never forget. The moment I walked out of that ballroom, my life began to change. I could feel it in the air, the electricity buzzing in my veins, the newfound clarity that seemed to take over my mind. For the first time in years, I wasn't helpless. I wasn't the daughter who had to silently endure her father's cruelty. I had a plan, and this time, it wasn't just about getting even, it was about changing the very core of who I was. I was going to build my own empire, a life that no one could dismiss or destroy. The first thing I did was cut ties with all the people who had been part of my father's world, his business contacts, his colleagues, and even distant relatives who had always known me as the other daughter. I didn't need them anymore. The people who had once laughed at my ambitions, the ones who had brushed me aside as a failure, would now be the ones who'd see me rise. I knew I couldn't do this alone. The first call I made was to my friend, Kate. We had grown up together, but our paths had diverged. Kate had always been driven and determined, qualities I had lacked when I was younger. But now I was determined to channel that same ambition. "Kate, I need your help," I said when she picked up. "It's time. I'm done being invisible. I need to build something that will make them regret ever doubting me." She listened quietly, then responded, "I've got your back, Lavra, whatever it takes." With Kate's help, I began laying the groundwork for my plan. I didn't want to just prove myself to my father. I wanted to show him that I could take everything he had worked so hard for and make it mine. It wasn't just about the business, it was about taking the very foundation of his success and turning it into something that was mine, all mine. I enrolled in a business development course, something I'd been meaning to do for years but never had the chance. I immersed myself in learning everything I could about digital marketing, sales strategies, and growing a business from the ground up. I knew I had to arm myself with knowledge, something my father would never have expected me to do. I'd always been the awkward daughter, the one who stayed in the background, but now I was determined to be the one in the spotlight. With my new skills, I began consulting for small businesses in my area, helping them grow through social media campaigns and strategic planning. It wasn't glamorous, but it was enough to get me started. I wasn't trying to be a billionaire overnight. I just wanted to prove to myself that I could do it, that I could build something solid on my own. Months passed and my reputation began to grow. I made a name for myself as someone who could turn failing businesses around. Word spread, and more clients came to me for help. Slowly but surely, I started to build a network that was independent of my father's connections. I began taking on bigger projects, and my business began to grow in ways I had never imagined. And through it all, I kept a secret one that I knew would come in handy when the time was right. I was getting closer to the day I'd show my father what I'd become. My plan wasn't just to prove to him that I wasn't a failure. It was to take everything he'd spent years building and turn it into my own empire. I didn't just want to be successful. I wanted to be the one to change the family's legacy. One day, a huge opportunity came knocking on my door. I had been approached by a major tech company looking for a partner to help expand their social media reach and brand presence. This was the big break I had been waiting for. The contract they were offering was worth millions, and they wanted me to lead the entire project. I couldn't believe it. The same company that my father had worked with for years had now sought me out. The irony wasn't lost on me. This was it, the moment I had been waiting for. The chance to take control of the very industry my father had spent his life building. But I wasn't just going to accept the offer and be grateful. I wasn't going to let my father have the satisfaction of seeing me succeed in his world. No, this was my moment. I would sign the contract, yes, but I would do it in a way that would leave him speechless. I didn't tell him. I didn't tell anyone. Instead, I kept quiet and prepared myself. I finalized the deal with the tech company, and once everything was in place, I made my move. The day the contract was finalized, I stood in front of the mirror and smiled at the reflection staring back at me. This was it. The moment my father would regret ever calling me a mistake. The moment had finally arrived. I had worked tirelessly to build my reputation, my business, and my independence. For months, I had silently transformed my life, taking every step with precision and purpose, all while hiding my true intentions from my family. They had no idea what was coming, and I knew they wouldn't believe it when they saw it. After finalizing the deal with the tech company, I decided it was time to make my move. I had carefully planned every detail, and now it was time to let my father Thomas see who I had become. The girl he had once dismissed, the daughter he had humiliated, was no longer invisible. It was time for him to realize that his rejection had only fueled my determination to rise above him. The opportunity to confront him in the way I wanted came sooner than I expected. My father, despite everything, still thought of me as his daughter, even though his treatment of me said otherwise. It had been months since that humiliating wedding speech, and while he hadn't directly addressed me, I could tell from the subtle glances and conversations that something was shifting. Maybe it was guilt, maybe it was fear, but it was clear he wasn't sure how to deal with the distance between us. One afternoon, I received a call from my mother. "Mia, your father wants to meet with you," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "It's time. He's ready to make amends." I paused. This wasn't what I had expected. My father, who had never once apologized for the way he treated me, was now asking for reconciliation. The irony of it wasn't lost on me. The man who had humiliated me in front of 100 people now wanted to make things right. I didn't know what was going through his mind, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going to make this easy for him. "Tell him I'll meet him," I said, my voice steady. But not in the way he thinks. That night, I prepared myself for what was to come. I didn't want this to be a simple apology session. No, this was about making sure my father saw the truth, that I had become everything he had never expected. I was no longer the awkward, invisible daughter. I was the one who had risen, and now it was time for him to see that. I didn't just want to confront him. I wanted to expose the life he had built on the backs of others, the very empire he thought was untouchable. I was going to make him see that his daughter, the one he called a mistake, was the one who would take his throne. The meeting was set for the following evening at one of the upscale restaurants my father loved. It was a place where the elite gathered, where money and power flowed like water, and where my father had often taken pride in showing off his wealth. But this time it would be different. I wasn't going there to be a spectator. I was going there to take control of my future. When I arrived, my father was already seated at a corner table, looking uncharacteristically uneasy. He was in his usual suit, the one he wore to every important business meeting, his hands gripping his wine glass with the intensity of a man who knew something was coming. I took a deep breath as I walked over to him. He stood up as I approached, a forced smile on his face. "Lavra, I'm glad you could make it," he said, his voice strained. I didn't sit down immediately. Instead, I stood across from him, my eyes cold. "I've heard a lot about your desire to make amends, Dad," I said slowly, my voice firm. "But I don't think a simple apology is enough anymore. After everything you've put me through, I need more than just words. I need to show you who I've become. And more importantly, I need to show you how much I've taken control of your world." His smile faltered, his eyes narrowing as he sat back down. "Lavra, this isn't necessary. We're family. You don't need to go so far. Is that what you really think?" I asked, stepping closer to the table. "That I don't need to go far? Well, you're wrong. You've been calling me a mistake for years, treating me like I don't matter, but I'm the one who built something you could never have dreamed of." I pulled out a folder from my bag and placed it on the table in front of him. His eyes flickered with a mix of curiosity and apprehension as he stared at the folder, unsure of what it contained. "You see, Dad," I continued, my voice getting colder, "I didn't just take control of my own life. I took control of something much bigger than that." I opened the folder, revealing the documents inside: contracts, emails, financial records, all linked to the very business he had spent decades building. "You've been moving money around, hiding assets, and manipulating contracts to keep everything in your control. But you never thought I'd figure it out, did you?" His face paled as he looked at the documents. "What is this?" he asked, his voice faltering. "What are you trying to say?" "I'm saying that I know everything," I replied. "I know about the shady deals, the kickbacks, the false reports you've been signing. And I'm saying that it's time for you to see what happens when your daughter stops being invisible." I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. "I'm not just the daughter you've dismissed," I said, my voice steady now, the power of the moment settling into my chest. "I am the one who has everything you've worked for in the palm of my hand. And when I'm ready, I'm going to expose everything you've tried to hide. You see, Dad, I'm the one who's been saving your empire all along." The truth had been revealed. My father, Thomas, sat in stunned silence as I exposed the dirty secrets of the empire he had spent years building. I could see the realization dawn in his eyes. His daughter, the one he had always looked down on, had just become the person capable of bringing him to his knees. The world he had carefully constructed, the one he thought would remain untouched, was crumbling around him, all because of me. For years, I had been the daughter who was invisible, the one who didn't matter. But in that moment, as I watched my father's face turn from pale to red with anger and disbelief, I knew everything had changed. I had taken back control, and in the process, I had turned his betrayal into my greatest victory. As I sat there across from him, the weight of the moment settling on my shoulders, I felt a surge of satisfaction. I had done it. I had finally taken my life back, and more than that, I had taken everything he had worked for. His money, his power, his reputation, it was all slipping away, and I was the one in control. "You think you can just destroy everything I've built?" My father spat, his voice filled with rage. "You think you're the one who's going to take everything from me?" I leaned forward, my eyes never leaving his. "I'm not trying to destroy anything, Dad," I said quietly. "You did that long before I came into the picture. All I'm doing is showing you what happens when you treat people like they don't matter. When you humiliate your own flesh and blood. This is the price of your arrogance." For a moment, he said nothing. He simply stared at me, his eyes narrowing as if he were trying to come up with some way to salvage what was left. But there was nothing he could do. The damage was done, and there was no going back. I stood up, not giving him the chance to speak. "I'm done with you, Dad," I said, my voice firm. "I'm done with your lies, your manipulation, and your toxic control. I've built my own life now, one that you can't touch. I don't need your approval, and I certainly don't need your money." I turned to walk away, but then I stopped, looking over my shoulder at him one last time. "I hope you enjoy watching everything you've worked for come crashing down, because that's exactly what's going to happen. You had the chance to be a father to me, but you chose to tear me down instead. Now you'll see just how much power I have." As I walked out of the restaurant, my heart was racing. I had done it. I had finally taken control of my life, and no one could take that away from me. For the first time, I felt like I had become the person I was always meant to be. No longer the invisible daughter, no longer the one who was always overlooked. I was a force to be reckoned with. But the true weight of my revenge came when I received the phone call from my lawyer a few days later. The state had launched an investigation into my father's company, Carter Municipal Systems, and the charges against him were piling up. Fraud, bribery, falsifying safety reports, the list went on. I couldn't help but smile as I listened to the details. It was happening. My father's empire was falling apart, and I was the one who had brought it all to light. What happened next was a blur. The media caught wind of the investigation, and soon, my father's name was plastered across news outlets. His reputation, which he had so carefully crafted over the years, was shattered beyond repair. People who had once looked up to him now saw him for what he truly was, a fraud. And as the investigation continued, more and more people began to come forward, revealing the depths of his corruption. Meanwhile, I continued to rise. My business flourished, and the respect I had worked so hard to earn began to grow exponentially. I was no longer the woman who had been pushed aside. I was now a successful entrepreneur, a woman who had taken control of her destiny and turned a lifetime of pain into the greatest revenge anyone could imagine. My family's reaction was predictable. My mother, who had always been passive in my father's presence, was the first to call. "Lavra," she said, her voice shaky. "What have you done?" "Your father is going to lose everything." I didn't hesitate. He already lost everything, Mom. You just didn't see it until now. And then there was Hannah. My sister. The one who had always been my father's golden child. The one who had always been in his favor. But even she couldn't escape the fallout of his actions. The trust he had promised her was frozen. The condo she had been counting on was no longer hers. And now she was forced to face the truth. My father's empire was built on lies, and she had been living in it without realizing it. 2 weeks later, my phone buzzed with a message from her. "Can we talk?" it said. I hesitated before replying, wondering what this conversation would bring. When I met her at the cafe, she didn't look like the perfect daughter anymore. She was still the woman who wore designer clothes and had the picture-perfect life on the outside, but there was a crack in her armor. She sat across from me, her hands twisting nervously. "I didn't know," she said quietly. "I didn't know what he was doing. I thought everything was fine, that he was just being supportive. But now I can't ignore it. I see everything." I nodded slowly. "It's too late to turn back, Hannah. You can't change what's been done. But you can choose what you do next." We sat in silence for a while, neither of us speaking. It was clear that the bond we once had was broken. But at least, for once, she was seeing things from my perspective. And maybe, just maybe, she'd understand that my revenge wasn't just about me. It was about giving us both the chance to escape from the world my father had created. As I walked away from the cafe that day, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. My revenge was complete, but it wasn't about hurting anyone. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my future. I had finally learned the hardest lesson of all sometimes. The greatest revenge is simply choosing yourself.